Madhya-lila, chapter 13, text 123. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. And you see the page. Now this is the mode of goodness which illuminates things. When you're in the mode of goodness, you can see things more clearly. So just as an external light allows you to see the page, when you conduct and cultivate the mode of goodness, you're able to perceive things more clearly and make more discrimination. That's why it's good for self-realization. This mode of goodness increases your perception. You can see things more clearly. And the mode of goodness, matter is in different forms. The mode of ignorance allows you to conduct immobilization. The mode of passion allows you to conduct materialistic activity, facilitates it. And the mode of goodness facilitates enlightenment. So, now that the page is clear, I can read the text. Payamanushujan Nena Shuni Gora Guna Nena Janmatara Vyartha Haila Paya Amrita Duni Pia Vishwakarta Pani Janmiya Se Kena Nahi Mala. Anyone who attains a human body but does not take to the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is baffled in his opportunity. Amrita Duni is a flowing river of the nectar of devotional service. If after getting a human body one drinks the water in a poison pit of material happiness, instead of the water of such a river, it would be better for him not to have lived, but to have died long ago. I'd like to say, I'm not saying, Prabhupada's saying. I had that one time in my, and I spoke about family life, but in a balanced way. It's not the ultimate goal of life. Someone got real upset, but Prabhupada said, it's not me that said. Balanced. I'm talking ultimate. So what I'll do is I'll read the purport maybe today. Yeah, I always say that. I always say I'll have questions, I'll have discussions, and I just talk. But my intention is that way today, to discuss it from different angles. Amriganitimanandasya gananjana ślokera akshurumanyena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Mahapadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Srise Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasade Gaur Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Krishnadas Kaviraj is expressing his personal ecstasies. Prabhupada sometimes said that about the purports. You know, they were his personal ecstasies. I was trying to think, and I looked in the Bhagavatam once, what are Prabhupada's personal ecstasies? I tried to find the 2 verses with the longest purports. And I believe the first one is the Abhideya Tattva, that means the science of how you realize the absolute truth. In the chapter Shloki, the 4 nutshell verses spoken by Krishna Lord Brahma at the beginning of the creation, and it says one should search after this directly or indirectly, anywhere and everywhere. Anywhere and everywhere means the universal applicability of Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna consciousness, the qualification, Prabhupada said the process is simple, the application is difficult. Right? So this is the kind of things we should think about, not just read. What does this mean? Right? Process, not just read words. What does it mean? The process is simple, the application is difficult. Because the process is simple means anyone can do it. Not everyone can do jnana. It takes complete celibacy, the path of jnana, because the tracks in which jnana moves is vairagya, or renunciation. Not everyone can do jnana. Karma takes, all kinds of purity and rituals and mantras. Not everybody can do karma. Rituals. With bhakti, you just have to bow down. Anyone can do that. It says in the Shastras, just as if one can take a bath in the month of Magh, January, in the Triveni. I was there several times. Triveni is the confluence of the Ganga, the Jamuna, and the Saraswati. I remember I was living in a little small ashram for a couple of days on the bank of that river. And I remember in January, very cold, going out and taking a bath. There was no one with a ticket. You have to pay a price to do this. You have to be, you're Westerner, you can't go in. Anyone can do it. Devotional service has that. Anyone can do it. But what's the application is difficult. The qualification of heart. Person can bow down, but if the heart is not humble, he won't bow down. He won't chant Hare Krishna. I always remember a vivid application of that. I was in Vrindavan many years. And there was one old devotee who was very sincere, very dedicated. And he used to sell in the back of the temple the Mahaprasadam he used to sell. Sometimes you'd see the turmeric on his hands because he's also be eating it. And his mind was not so controlled. So sometimes he'd be chanting his Gayatri, and you'd go into the artik, in 45 minutes he'd go back, he'd still be chanting his Gayatri. He just couldn't control his mind. And then one person became a devotee. He was a South Indian Brahmin, he was a yogi, he was a writer for the newspaper, and he was very disciplined and controlled. But he left very quickly. because he wasn't humble. Anyone can do it, but will you do it? And therefore, one of Srila Prabhupada's personal ecstasies was the verse, anywhere and everywhere. That's the universal applicability of Krishna consciousness. You look at that purport, it's interesting. Prabhupada said it doesn't even depend what species of life you're in. I have several instances of devotee dogs. I was once on the Ratha-yātrā, the walking festival in India. We walked all around India. I used to join that whenever I had a time at Prabhupada's centennial, and so many years ago, I can't remember that. Or maybe it was Mahaprabhu's 500th anniversary. So I remember I was in this one city, and a dog joined the program. And every Mangal Arti, the dog was in the Mangal Arti outside by the carts, and the dog would walk around on the procession. And then I wasn't there every day for Mangal Arti. Then the dog walked all the way up to Madhya-lila and then died. I remember going to Ecstatic, the birthplace of Lord Nityananda. There was a dog that would join the kirtan in Kari. Universal applicability. So that was Prabhupada's personal ecstasy. The other verse that I remember is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, the 9 processes of devotional service. So, Prabhupada's personal ecstasies. Now, in this particular verse, describes this flowing river of devotional service, and if you get a human body, and instead you drink the poison of material happiness instead of that water. So there's 2 drinks you can have. Materialistic happiness or a nectar of devotional service. And there's a comparison that's being made here. And the comparison is made in such a strong way. But I'm saying personal ecstasies, I feel this verse is kind of a personal ecstasy of Krishna Das Kaviraj. He's expressing his heart so strongly. So on one side, there's this, if you don't drink this river of devotional service, instead drink the river of materialistic activity, it would be better you have died long ago. What is the river of devotional service? And why is it so good? This is how I would explain it in a simple way. Look at what material consciousness really means. It means that you really have a conviction that pleasure means to put you in the center and to have everything around you please your desires. And you have the conception because there's a relationship between enjoyment and control. Because enjoyment means your desires are fulfilled. And for your desires to be fulfilled, the world has to move your way. So without control, how can you be the enjoyer? Because we see it all the times in our own personal lives. How often does something happen that we do not want to happen? Something that happens that's against our desires. How often? Always. So if you're on this platform, that my happiness will be here. My desire. And therefore, it's dependent on the world moving according to that desire. You'll always be frustrated. Why? Because the world is not moving according to your desire. Because you are not the controller of the world. that world is controlled by someone else. And unless you love that person, you will never be happy. Because when you love someone, then their desire becomes your happiness. So just, unless you love God, you can never be happy. If you love God, then the world, then your desire is fulfilled. Because you can simply serve that will, that desire, and never be frustrated. Well, what a shift from this material consciousness. Now here is spiritual consciousness. Of course, this position is an illusion. It's not you. You are not the center. You are not the controller. So whatever you get doesn't even come to you. It comes to something that you are thinking is you, and therefore you never become satisfied at heart. Now, I'm not making a statement when I preach renunciation that we should not fulfill our desires. As Bhagavatam says, kamesya nindriya pritya labho jiveta yavata. We should take what we need. We should eat to live. We should not live to eat. We should enjoy to live. We shouldn't live to enjoy. But for what purpose? So we can get out of this illusion. Because the pleasure never really comes to us. It comes to the body and the mind, which facilitates the illusion that I'm the controller of joy. So it never really touches your soul. The example I would give, because I grew up in India, it was very much caste-oriented. It's not New York, where the taxi driver can be a great philosopher. I used to be in the temple in Brooklyn, someone would come in, they were defeated in an argument by the taxi driver. Oh, shake it up. In India, the driver is the driver. And people in the village, they're very thin, they're very poor. But when the media increases, then they get these desires that they would like to be a superhero, they would like to get the Bollywood girl instead of the arranged wife. It'll never happen in their life. What do? You go past a little cinema in India, and there's all kinds of bicycles, little rusted bicycles with little tippets, little cans where they keep their food. Oh. They go to the movies. And what does the movie do? It gives you cheap thrills. It gives you vicarious thrills. So they watch it, and they feel they're the superhero. They feel, but it never happens to them. And that's what happens to us in the world. Never. So if you want to drink that water, what is the nectar of devotional service? I'm actually been studying this because I want to write an article, and I'm actually in the process of researching. I think it's important to write. I want to write an article on the correlation between bhakti and yoga. So what is bhakti ultimately? Of course, it's in our inherent feeling of serving Krishna. But how does that feeling manifest? And what is that feeling? What is bhakti? Bhakti is part of the pleasure potency. Devotion is part of the pleasure potency. What pleasure is devotion or love of God. That's what pleasure is. That's God's pleasure and that's our pleasure. So how does it work? The essential element of God's bliss potency has to energize your heart. You see, it's a very beautiful concept that there's two types of pleasure. I explained this before. Sarup Ananda and Bhakti Ananda. So what's Sarup Ananda? Sarup Ananda is the kind of God's own pleasure. I describe it as kind of lying in the coastal ocean or swinging on a hammock. Very, very pleasant. I know in Vrindavan there's one place I go where I can swing on a hammock. It feels very, very pleasant. But Bhakti-ananda, or the higher pleasure, the pleasure of devotion, is a pleasure that must come from outside you to you. So that's our function in the universal conception. We're meant to be part of the pleasure, rasavai saha, of that universal reality by being a receptacle for God's bliss potency, which flows through our heart towards the absolute reality. And that's the highest pleasure. That's called bhava. So we're meant to be that receptacle where flowing through our heart is intense, selfless devotion. Prema. Where we have such an intense desire and such a love for the absolute reality, we have such a love for Sri Krishna, that we just want to please Him. But in doing that, we also enjoy. Because what pleases God is that energy of bhakti, which is the pleasure potency. And therefore that energy in giving God pleasure also flows through our heart. It's just like the mother who loves the child. She does not want any pleasure for herself. She just loves the child. She wants everything for the child. But somehow or other, tasting that energy of motherly love, which is the pleasure of the child, gives her more pleasure than her child has. And that's why Krishna has to become his best devotee Radha. Because it's higher pleasure. So here it is. We don't want to be in the center because we're not really in the center. There's someone else in the center, that's God. We don't want to see everything as the object of our desire. We want to be the object of God's desire. We want to please God. And when we do that, by becoming dasa, dasa, anudasa, when we develop this seva bhav, this mood of service, then that energy of God, that bliss potency, flows to our hearts and opens our hearts in love and devotion, and that flows to our hearts. Otherwise, what flows through our hearts? Selfish desire, culminating in intense lust. It burns. So now you make that choice. He's saying, make that choice. What pleasure do you want? And how much illusion I'm in. That I'm still thinking that if I can come here, I'll really be happy. If I can get that object to fulfill this desire, then I will really be happy. And we do it in subtle ways, right? And gross ways, but subtle ways. If I get that position, if I get that praise, if I get that place, very hard to actually do this, that God, I'm surrendered to you, whatever your will is, I want. Are we ready to do that? Because that's what we need, to have that river of flow of the nectar of devotion flowing through our hearts. Whatever you want. Prabhupada threw his hands up. Krishna, whatever you want. Okay, go to New York. Go to America. If Prabhupada was a materialist, he would say, there's nothing there for me. I'm an elderly, aristocratic Bengali gentleman. The objects of my desire is a retired life in Vrindavan. Krishna said, come to her. Yes, whatever you want, I will do. So this contrast is setting up, and now we can read the purport, which I haven't even gotten to. We can read the purport and read the Shastra Praman to this point. I always say, for Jumna, I had one scholar, I know we does scholars conference every year, young scholars, good scholars. And one year we invited someone from India, scholar, big scholar. And he said something that Pradyumna didn't like. Pradyumna was very gentle, got up and said, where is your pramana? I want evidence. So here's the, now this is how purports work. Here's the verse, that's the point. Now here is Prabhupada giving pramana. And what's the pramana? That this position of being the servant is so much higher than this position of being the master. So here, so he quotes, and this is wonderful scholarship. He quotes from Caitanya-caritamrta. Caitanyam idam vishvam yadi chaityam ishvaram navadu swarta shastra yapi brahmyanti tejana. The material world is without Krishna consciousness. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna consciousness personified. Therefore, if a very learned scholar or scientist does not understand Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, certainly he is wandering uselessly in this world. As it said, if you drink, if you get the human body, because the human body is meant to realize, an animal only can look at this. I want that, that should be mine. A human being doesn't simply act impulsively, he can make judgment. Not what I like, but what is best. So, if you get that human body, you shouldn't just act on that selfish platform, what is best. So here it is, he says a scientist or a scholar, if he does not understand Chaitanya, he's wandering uselessly. Another pramana from same book. Prasarita mahaprema piyushurasa sagare Caitanya-caritamrta prakrite yo dino dina evasa. A person who does not take advantage of the nectar of devotional service overflowing during the presence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's cult is certainly the poorest of the poor. You don't take advantage of this. We should feel this, but you'll only feel it if you actually try to experience it. Otherwise, you'll have some dichotomy in your mind. You'll think, oh, actually, that's actually happening. It's not what I'm doing. When I took sannyas, the insane age of 32, almost half my life. I'll be 60 this year. And it was a very interesting sannyas because I was supposed to take on Gaur Purnima of 1982. And then it was the morning program in Mayapur, it was the Ekadasi, that's 4 or 5 days before. And the godbrother came and said, you're taking sannyas in 2 hours. There was some problem in Saṅkṣepe, I took sannyas, I had to leave. I had to dye new clothes, I had to get shaved. And then Saṅkṣepe gave a lecture, and he told when he took sannyas, Prabhupada, he gave such a beautiful lecture on the 16th chapter, first verse of the Bhagavad Gita. What's that verse? What's the verse though? Sattva Jnana Yoga Vivastita. Something Sattva Samshrudhim Jnana Yoga Vivastita. To explain that verse, Abhayam Sattva Samshrudham Jnana Yoga Vivastita. 3 qualities of sannyas: fearless, Sattva Samshrudham, pure, Jnana Yoga Vivastita. You should be philosophical. And when Prabhupada gave that lecture, as Satyarupani gave the lecture, he said that Prabhupada was looking at the original cover of the album, of the Happenings album, one of the first albums. He looked at it and he said, "Oh, I look very philosophical." Abhayam. He described each of these. What was the point there? Yeah, when Satyarupani gave that lecture, yeah, I remember. He said, when he took sannyas, one of the things Prabhupada said, you're going to go to rich people's homes. And there's going to be so many nice things. You should never think as a sannyasi, oh, I could have had that. I could have had that. But you should feel that the real wealth is the name, the holy name of Krishna. That's the real wealth. But to feel that wealth, you have to do it. You have to dedicate your life. Then you'll feel that this is the real wealth. And it's better than anything else. It's better than anything else. So, this is the last verse when we have time to finish the whole purport. But, Avatirne Gorachandre, Vistirne Premasagare, Suprakashita Ratno He, Yo Dino Dina Evasa. So actually, very nice, another verse, Dino Dina Eva, Dino Dina. This is Dino Dina, the poorest of the poor. So let's find out what else is the poorest of the poor. The advent of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is just like an expanding ocean of nectar. One who does not collect the valuable jewels within the ocean is certainly the poorest of the poor. So this is Shastra Praman, and then they'll give another 3 verses from the Bhagavatam in the 2nd canto. Famous verses about if you don't take to this, if you get wealth, you have a big turban on your head and it'll make you sing faster. If you're, talking, but you're not speaking about Krishna, like the croaking of frog and snake will come. What are the use of legs? If you don't walk to the temple, they're like the trunk of a tree. And then there's another verse from 10:1-4, which is a beautiful verse, Nivrita Kaishilpa Giyamana. And then finally, there's the 3rd canto, the Tirtha Pade. Although a person is apparently living, if he does not serve the lotus feet of devotees, he's considered to be a dead body. I'm not saying. I'm not saying. Speak strongly. Makes the point. Then, after that point, you can make a practical application. Okay, what if, in my manas, these desires are so strong I can't renounce them? Okay, then your dharma is to fulfill them, according to the Shastras, in a way that you'll be satisfied and your mind will think of Krishna so you can eventually transcend it. Okay, maybe do I have time for one question? Okay, no one said anything. Question? Yeah.
If, as you so nicely explained, we can't get any enjoyment when we have this view that we're in the center and everything goes according to our desires. We can't be happy in that situation.
Yeah.
How is it that people are happy in the mode of goodness? People who dualistic,
Yeah.
yet in the mode of goodness, they're content, they're happy.
Relatively. There's still duality. Because unless you're in the platform of the soul, then whatever you have, you're going to lose. So it's relatively happy. And there is a certain happiness in matter. If you deep down the original state of matter, and that goodness gives a clearer perception, it gives contentment, but it's still relative. But bayam dvatiya viniveshita shat shet it's still temporary. So therefore there's duality. And what's the duality? Let's say you're in the mode of goodness, okay? But there's no self-realization. Right? So how happy you are when you know that you will be non-existent soon. So it's kind of a peacefulness, and it's kind of a happiness, but it doesn't last. And therefore, Narada Muni, who had that happiness, who was in the Himalayas, right, and had that happiness, you see, because the mode of goodness is not pure, because there's attachment to that mode of goodness, and that attachment is passion. And therefore, he said, what did he say? You have two faults, you're not complete in service, and there's some tinge of mistake. So what's the tinge of mistake? That there's attachment to that. And attachment is suffering. Because if you're attached to something material, you're going to lose it. So therefore, in his perfection, he had to leave the attachment to the mode of goodness and come to the point of transcendence by surrendering directly to God's will. The mode of goodness is an intermediate stage. Otherwise, why transcend it if it's perfection? Because it's temporary. So it's tinged. So it is happiness, but in the back of the mind is duality. So we want happiness without duality. Is that okay? Okay. I guess we end now. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
His Holiness Dhanurdhara Swami Maharaj ki
Jai.